views and opinions expressed on the DMV Daily Broadcast Network are those of the host, guest, and callers, and not necessarily those of this network, its management, other hosts, or advertisers.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of the DMV Daily Radio Show. I'm your host, Hassan Giordano, aka Mr. Politics, back in the building. I know yesterday y'all missed us. The snow kind of held us up, and we had a wonderful program in store for you. But don't worry, the sister will be here next Wednesday, and we're going to give you that information. But today, we have an even greater and more informative program in store for you. We're joined by two knowledgeable brothers who will discuss Maryland's Minority Business Enterprise Program, the oldest in the country, which was established back in 1978 to ensure that small minority and women-owned firms had the opportunity to fully participate in a fair manner for state and federally funded projects. However, the playing field hasn't always been so balanced in providing minorities with the same equal opportunities as others, both as subcontractors as well as primes. So we will get into all that and more on today's program. But before we get into our show, as always, got to let you know that this program is brought to you by our fine sponsors, such as that stellar legal team known as Bates & Garcia's Law Firm. Specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases, Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal dream team. So make sure you contact them today for your free consultation. 410-814-4600 is the number. Tell them DMV Daily referred you, and they'll give you the homeboy discount. The show is also brought to you by those savvy political strategists over there at Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and successfully gotten people elected to office since the 1970s. If you're thinking about running for office in 2020, make sure you give them a call today. Get your campaign website set up, integrated social media, video, campaign plan, and more to ensure success. They can be reached at 240-242-7505 or on the web at www.politicomsolutions.com. And of course, Together We Rise is not just a slogan, but rather a blueprint for the future of the union movement. Make sure you join the Fight for 15 and other progressive pieces of legislation being advocated in Annapolis by the nation's #1 union, SEIU 500. Join the fight today, www.seiu500.org. And of course, you can listen to this program or past programs 24/7 at dmvdaily.news. You can also check out the podcast, The Annapolis Report, with your man, Mr. Politics, as I break down all the bills and happenings going on in Annapolis during the 90-day legislative session. Or go check out that new groundbreaking legal podcast known as Law and Disorder with Ivan Bates. We just released episode 2 earlier today. Little functions were down. I know it's every other Tuesday, but the podcasting site that we use kind of was going haywire the past 2 days. So it's up. Make sure you go check it out today. Law and Disorder with Ivan Bates. He sits down with former detective Kevin Turner. They talk about how to know your rights, whether you're pulled over by the police, or accosted by the police, apprehended, whatever the case may be, when dealing with law enforcement. From a law enforcement and a defense attorney's viewpoint, they'll show you and let you know about what your constitutional rights are and how to deal with certain situations. If you thought episode 1 was blazing, definitely want to go check this one out. Gives you a lot of insight that you probably wouldn't know, especially if you've never encountered law enforcement or been a part of the criminal justice system. You can also listen to those podcasts and all the programs at iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play, or watch them live on Facebook, YouTube, and or Periscope at DMV Daily News. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page and like us on our Facebook page. And of course, you can always donate to this independent journalism. Got to keep the wheels moving. just go to YouTube, PayPal.com/DMV Daily News. You can go there, donate $1, $5, $100. If you built like that and you're a minority business contractor, you can give $1 million. Les Jones.
Hassan, you were absolutely right, though, to make it simple and easy, because the ME doesn't work on, the .com doesn't work on handheld devices, so it's just best to do the .me. So I apologize. So I messed you up there.
Did not say that.
It works on desktop. It doesn't work on tablets and phones. So
PayPal.me.
Right.
DMV Daily News. All right. You'll get there.
That one works both ways. So,
or just go to the website. I think we got it up there on the website. So it's easier just to go right there and make it happen. Now, of course, if you want to join in today's conversation, just call in or even text in your questions or comments to the studio phone line. 410-819-2370 is the number. And if you're watching us live on Facebook, like Keith Scott and Joseph Kane, Tamara Stinnett. Now, I bet you are watching. Summer Goodman and Jason and, Raymond Sneed. Long time, my brother. Tell our great councilwoman I said hello. Got to take y'all to a Redskins game so we can watch them beat the crap out of the Redskins.
Don't get him started.
Yeah. And before we get into the program, got to let you know, I was forced by some individuals who said, since you like to talk about the Central Committee so much, then put this in your mouth. Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee. It's holding their first annual Black History Program and voter registration drive. It's this Saturday, Douglas Memorial Community Church. That's over there at 1325 Madison Avenue. Goes on from 12 noon to 3 p.m. They got special guests such as my main man, Dr. Reverend Todd Yeary, former delegate Angela Angel, Professor Michael Higginbotham will be in the house, along with the individuals and members of the Democratic State Central Committee from Baltimore City. Dance performances by Expressive Forever Dance Incorporated. You can get registered to vote over there. Free parking is available. All ages are welcome. Bring your kids along with you. Trust and believe. If I was in town, I would, but the Terps game. We don't miss the Terps for nothing, especially when they doing the way they doing. They just knocked off Iowa the other day. We in the top 25 for the first time in God knows how long. So we got to be at the Terps game. But I know this is going to be a packed event. You definitely want to make it out early. 12 noon to 3 p.m. this Saturday over at Douglas Memorial Church, 1325 Madison Avenue. And guess what? It's free. Can't beat free any day of the week. So now, I don't know, maybe y'all seen this directory floating around town. I know I keep one in my desk drawer at all times, and you should too. Today we're joined by Sean Stinnett, who is an expert in MBE, WBE contracting here in Maryland, where he serves as the PRG administrator with the Maryland Department of General Services and also serves as the president of the West Arlington Community Association. Joining us to my left today is main man Will Holmes. He's the founder of Will Holmes Consulting, which is an award-winning MBE certified business management and technology consulting firm that offers business capital and operational solutions to emerging companies. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. This is a very important topic, one that I'm, admittedly not really up to date on as much as I should be, but with the minority contractors right upstairs and my number one woman, Sheila Dixon, I don't want to get beat up too bad, so I had to make sure we have this program because there's a lot of misinformation that's going on out there, and we want to be able to correct the record, set the record straight, and really educate our listeners. Most people want to come to this show to get an education. They don't want to hear the left and the right politics and jamming stuff down their throat. They want to learn something. So, Sean, you had reached out to me, and we had talked about having a program like this, and I'm glad you did. Explain to the listeners what the Maryland Business Enterprise, because I know you were explaining there's not a difference in the state-wise in terms of MBE and WBE, and what's the importance of that especially for minority businesses to understand?
Sure. So thank yourself, Jason, and your other two co-hosts for having myself and Will, and I truly appreciate. So yeah, so what it is well, one, I'm the PRG administrator for the Office of Business Programs at the Maryland Department of General Services. PRG stands for Procurement Review Group, which entails that I get all of the contracts that comes out of a DGS that are valued at $100,000 and more. So what I do is evaluate, I read the entire contract, the scope of work, whatever it entails, and see if there's any MBE or subcontract opportunities that we can apply to that particular contract. So there's 3 programs that the state of Maryland participates in. One is, of course, the MBE, which is the Minority Business Enterprise. The second one is the Veterans piece, the Veterans Small Business Enterprise. And then the third piece is the Small Business Reserve Program. Small Business Reserve Program is not a subcontract opportunity. A Small Business Reserve Program is a prime status, sort of, that you could put yourself in a position to be a prime contractor. So that's not a subcontract opportunity. It's a designation of you getting the needed experience to grow your business on being a prime contractor. So we have, with those 3 different programs, the state of Maryland has 3 different goals as far as that we have to achieve at the end of the fiscal year. So we have to make sure that at least that we reach 29%, which is the average as far as MBE participation, with all of the contracts. The veteran goal is 1%, very small. We went from 0.5 to 1% now. And then now the small business participation goal is 15%, which it used to be 10%. So when the governor says that the Maryland is open for business, is definitely open for business, because what we try to do is we try to give those contractors, mainly the minority business contractors and the veterans and so forth, the much needed resources that they need so they can, be able to obtain contracts as a prime contractor, or even be able to team up with other contractors or other vendors to be either go through joint ventures or be able to subcontract on various contracts. So at least we try to, open it up and give as much information as possible so they can be successful as far as whatever they're trying to do, and you by utilizing that MBE certification as the resource that it is.
So the 29% MBE quota, that's not individual contracts, that's an overall year.
That's an overall, right? That's an overall. So if we have 5,000 contracts that we send out, we have to make sure that within that bundle of 500 contracts, we hope to achieve 29% as far as that's going to minority businesses that we subcontract out to.
See, I always thought that it was every contract had to have up to 29%.
No, that'd sort of be impossible, because there's a lot of contracts. Like DGS also facilitates commodity contracts, where somebody's just looking, like prime example, we have the agency is looking for salt. You know what I mean? What can you really sub out, because the only one component is salt. Now you can look at, okay, maybe you can transportation, because somebody's got to go pick it up, whatever. But it depends on if you're ordering directly from a manufacturer. It's just everything is being shipped to that wherever it needs to go. So it's really no subcontract opportunities to pull from that contract. But we look at the contract that I was telling you about before, that we're actually right now we're doing a design build of a Maryland State Police Barracks in Cumberland, Maryland. So when you're talking about something that magnitude, you have at least about 50 skill set, 50 scopes of 50 pieces of scope of work that's within that contract, and then that's when you can start pulling and seeing where are the subcontract opportunities I can get. So in that particular case, I put a 30% MBE goal on it, because I can justify as far as that there are 30 pieces of work that can be subcontracted out to get that MBE participation, as well as a 10% veteran goal that we can get veteran participation on it as well.
So, Will, your company is MBE certified, and you teach others, the nuts and bolts of this, people like myself and others who may not have a clue as to how to get started getting into the minority contracting. What would be a first step for somebody who's small minority contract or minority owned business they want to be, certified, but they don't understand or know exactly the steps to take?
That's a great question. Usually, and the beautiful thing about these certifications, it's really just like a checklist. It's just paperwork, and there are requirements for each one. Some you have to be in business for 2 years. Others you have to you can start off like with the state, like with the city. I think you have to be in business for 2 years. With the state, I think it's right off you can apply like pretty much like within your first few years of being open.
First year.
So it's really, we look at the checklist and we look at the paperwork involved. Some things they can go after right away, some things they can't. Often some of the challenges are they don't have a strong accounting system, so they don't have the ability to maybe put their financial documents together. So we help them with that. So it's really the paperwork part. My team helps companies with that, just helping them get their stuff together so they can submit it. It's free to submit. For us, it's not a big deal. We've done so many of them. But obviously for that company, it gives them really just another way to compete and go after these contracts. Some of the challenges, though, and so for any aspiring government contractor, you should be thinking about, one, what can you really handle? Because you don't want to get involved or go after a contract that you don't have the capacity to handle. And if you realize, okay, I don't have the capacity, you should be thinking about how you can build that capacity. And usually the issue may be, I don't have the capital, maybe to, like you said with salt, I don't have the capital maybe to buy 10,000 pounds of salt, or I don't have a truck yet to transport it. So looking at how you can actually prepare for capital, to actually apply for capital, how you can have that conversation with a lender or an investor. We do all those things with companies to help them. It's really to prepare for certifications, prepare to build their capacity, help them with their website, help them with their value proposition, help them understand which agencies, federal, state, or local, how to identify which ones to go after, which ones are buying, what they're selling. So all of those things we work with companies, in particular with the MBE certification. That's what we do.
So it's a difference between Maryland MBE and Baltimore City MBE.
Yes.
And they're both free, but what's is it a harder process for one or the other? Is it more expensive for one or the other, or is it somewhat similar?
I mean, for me, it seems to be pretty similar. I mean, it's usually just the same types of documents. I think with the state, when we do those, it's maybe a little more as far as on the financial side, and maybe ask a little bit more about taxes and things like that. But it's I think with the city, it's like maybe 25 items. With the state, it's maybe like 30. I mean, it's really just putting the paperwork together and submitting it. Sean, do you have anything you want to add on that, though?
Yeah, well, it's a free registration as far as to get your certification. When you're talking about the MBE on the state side and the city side. However, we don't saying if you just have your MBE certification with the city, the state doesn't accept it. So you have to that's a separate application process that you have to register for. So
what about if you're state certified, will Baltimore City accept it?
Yeah, I think they do in some cases. Don't quote me on that. But I think in some contracts that they would accept it. Because we really scrutinize as far as going through the process to make sure that, because there is some folks that may say, hey, let me get my wife, I'm a white male, have a company, and let me get my wife to say that she's the owner of the company and try to get this MBE certification. So we really scrutinize as far as individuals that are trying to do that and really kind of pull out and say, well, we have to hold off as far as on approving your certification and so forth. But yeah, but I want everybody to understand that it is a free registration. You can do it online, especially with the state. You can do the process online as far as get your MBE certification, as well as all the certifications being done through the Maryland Department of Transportation. So the MDOT actually holds every first Tuesday of each month, they have an MBE workshop, where it pretty much takes you from A to Z, that as far as educates you on the process and how to fill out that application correctly. And sometimes some folks will say, oh, it took me like a year, 2 years to get it. That's really based on you. because if you have all your information in your ducks in a row, really our goal is to actually get you certified at least within 0 to 3 months. I sit on the MBE commission, so I hear when people come and, you know, testify, of course, on behalf of their company and say, look, this is my company, this is how it is. But so it's up to you as whatever having your information correct.
What's the website information for the registration?
It's on the MDOT website, the Maryland Department of Transportation. Just go ahead and Google it. I want to say it's m.maryland, Maryland spelled .gov.
Okay, and family, we'll make sure it's included in the Facebook feed.
Maryland spelled out. Yeah,
right.
He was right.
Okay.
.gov.
Yeah. We all had gone through Google, so now we upgraded.
Well, that was through Bing. So how about that? Google got a challenger now. It's minority certified too.
Exactly. And even speaking about the Small Business Reserve Program, that program, one, it's also free registration. It only takes you about 20 minutes, and that's a self-certification program, self-certification process that you can automatically go in. It just takes 20 minutes. You just got to fill in pretty much your company's demographics, your tax information, and so forth, and then you're in. You get a Small Business Reserve ID number. And that's done through the eMaryland Marketplace website, which is the state procurement site.
And Sean, I'm glad you mentioned that. And you may have some questions about this as we go along, but you know, the paperwork, in my opinion, I think is really the easy part. Mm-hmm. It's really understanding, one, like for example, what do you want to be certified in? I mean, your MBE certification isn't just that, oh, you're a company. It's you're a company and you're very proficient in these certain things. Right. So the challenge quite often is helping business owners to understand, okay, it's not just, okay, well, look, I do the wires and I do, let's say, cloud computing. But I've got this guy over here who sometimes subs for me and he does, maybe something else, some other IT function. If you as the owner are not proficient in the things that maybe some of your employees do, or you can't go behind them and make sure that things are done correctly, then I believe that you will not be able to get a certification. Is that correct, Sean?
Right, that's correct. I mean, you have to justify that, one, you as the owner have the expertise as well. Of course, somebody can be on your team, but you have to justify how they fall within your team, and knowing that, okay, if something goes wrong, that issue or that sort of certain thing will be addressed. So you have to justify as far as that once you apply for whatever NAICS code that is, and that's once you get certified, you're registering your business with certain NAICS codes that'll justify as far as what your skill set within your profile of your business, which the type of service that you provide. So it's just all of a justification component to it, that you have to justify whether or not that you as a company has that expertise in that particular skill set.
So that's my question, and you must have been reading my notes on this one, but I always, for years, and I think a lot of other people have as well, assumed that minority contracting was primarily only dedicated and specific to construction workers and contractors. Can you be a minority contractor in almost any field of, whether it be communications, technology, whatever?
Yes, minorities do everything now these days.
Yeah, but I mean, minority contracting has always had this stigma of it's always contract, there's always development, it's always, the Plush Joneses. Right.
Well, those are the ones that was really, really bringing more of the noise, the Arnold Jolivet's, the Robert Clays and so forth. So, I think that, well, one, of course, they were bringing more of the vocal aspect because we were missing out on opportunities as far as subcontract opportunities on large contracts. So really contracts as a whole. However, we have to really start thinking of is that, subcontracting is not just the only way that we can be a part of that contract. We need to put ourselves, and we are more putting ourselves in position as far as being prime contractors. That's where we need to start really even thinking. And really, even though a contract doesn't have a MBE goal attached to it, that doesn't stop that minority vendor to actually bid on that contract as a prime contractor. That's why the Small Business Reserve Program is unique as far as to give you an opportunity to get that experience as a prime contractor, as well as to be able to knock out off all the larger companies. You know, the only way, if there's a contract that's procured as an SBR procurement, a big company like a Whiting Turner, or we're dealing with construction, or a Gilbane cannot bid on that contract because they're not certified as a small business reserve vendor. Only a company that has that SBR certification, they can go after that particular contract. So that gives them more of a playing field that I'm bidding against somebody that's more on my capacity. Even if they're a mom and pop shop down in their basement, we encourage those companies to be a part of that SBR program. And you can do that now, even though if you don't have your MBE certification. Because sometimes some folks think that I have to get my MBE first, then the SBR. No, you can do your SBR now. Prime example, Christopher Irvin, Lazarus Wright. I needed some transportation for my kids during the summer with YouthWorks. He got a bus. I, got him into. He was already registered as an SBR vendor with DGS, with the state. We automatically contacted him, got the transportation, and we got that participation, from his company. So that's what it's all about. He doesn't right now doesn't have his MB certification, but we were able to use him as far as because he was one of our SBR vendors by him being listed in that directory.
And can you break that down one more time for those that may just be tuning in? What is an SBR?
SBR is a small business reserve. It's a small business reserve program as far as with the state.
Okay, and what does that allow?
That allows you have an opportunity to become a prime contractor on contracts, and it also allows you to compete. Actually, it goes through a bidding process. We select the lowest bidder. It allows you to bid against companies that more like you, and not the bigger companies that can underbid you for thousands of dollars, and you be able to win the award. Because what we do, we go by as far as what's the lowest bidder. We pull that company first, but also we look at as far as to make sure that they're achieving all of the components to it, whether they have a minority business participation, veteran participation, or so forth.
I got a couple more questions, but I want to go to the line first. We got a caller waiting to call in and ask you a question, I'm assuming. Caller, welcome to the DMV Daily Show.
Hello?
Hello.
How you doing? This is Keith Scott.
Hey, Keith.
How you doing?
All right, and you?
I'm okay. I have a question.
Shoot.
Okay. If if somebody who's bid on these contracts, if it's a construction contract, say I'm in Maryland and I get a business construction contractor and I prefer not to hire Maryland residents. Would it be any kind of stipulations for that?
When you're saying hire Maryland residents, what?
Say I have the contract. I'm a Maryland resident, and I don't hire people from Maryland. Would that be any kind of problem with that?
No, our contract is set up with the prime contractor, so we're doing business with you. We're not looking at as far as on who you're hiring. Of course, we can give our sort of encouragement that to hire locally and so forth. But we have when a contractor is awarded, when a prime contractor is awarded a contract with the state, our contract is with that particular prime contractor only.
Okay, so it's no stipulation that does he have to hire locally? No.
We there's Baltimore City does. They have maybe different MOUs or different, various standards that they want you to hire locally. Like I know a lot of the 21st century school construction that is going on right now. Baltimore City has a stipulation within that contract that they do hire locally as far as labor and so forth. But as far as with the state, dealing in mainly contracts that I'm accustomed to, we just we hire, our contract is set up with that prime contractor. So if there's an MBE component to it, of course, they have to abide by, as far as how they have to explain to us how they're going to reach that MBE participation. And that's from certified MBE firms within Maryland. Now, we do have a lot of MBE firms that are in other states, but they're registered in Maryland, which they can come in to do business because they know that there's a lot of business as far as that's happening in the state of Maryland.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thanks for calling, Keith. Now, we got a question from Facebook and says that, has there been legislation to increase the local, state, or federal MBE percentages? Since it's a minimum, some prime contractors don't try to exceed the minimum requirement.
So back in, I want to say it was 2012 or 2013, the MBE goal was at 25%. Before that was sort of near the end of the O'Malley administration, and it was actually raised to 29%. So what happens is, as far as that's our overall goal that we all have to achieve, and not saying that all agencies actually achieve that, because it depends on, how many contracts actually goes out as far as that particular agency and so forth. However, the good thing about the Hogan administration now, and especially with us really following his lead as far as Maryland Open for Business, that as far as coming from DGS and the Office of Business Programs, we try to be very, very aggressive as far as in placing MBE and veteran goals, but mainly MBE participation, so we can increase participation on, a lot of these contracts. Now, our hope is just to, just like a lot of people get upset when they see out-of-state companies or even out-of-town companies coming to Baltimore to do different jobs. However, we need to do the same thing. We need to travel to those locations, whether it be in Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, Eastern Shore, because that's where we have sort of our challenges in the MBE population. But you need to be willing, as far as when you fill out that profile, you need to say, hey, I'm willing to travel to those places, because, don't think that you're going to cure, the funds to do that job. You put that in your bid proposal. You put traveling expense, accommodation, and so forth. I know there's a lot of companies that actually starting to, buy up homes so they can house, construction workers and so forth, or buying land so folks can drive their tractors to locations to be able to, to have them there instead of folks driving back and forth. So you want to do your research as far as and tap into those particular companies so you can be able to successfully bid on certain contracts that are out of, your range as far as, or maybe beyond like 50 to 100 miles away. But you need to build your proposal into that so you can actually, because everybody is in this business to make money. So we don't place goals on to make it challenging for folks, but we put them in to actually be able to, one, get people to work, build the program up, build your capacity as a company, and so forth.
So if you're state certified, you can operate in other states, or is your minority status valid in other states, or can help you to be valid in other states? No. Your Maryland state certification is only good in Maryland. Okay. It's just you can get certified in other states, and that's where a lot of companies from other states get a Maryland certification. Okay. Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My question is this. You from Baltimore?
I am.
Last time I checked, Baltimore is a majority black city. Why in the hell we still getting minority contracts? Shouldn't we be getting the majority? Shouldn't the other folks be getting the minority contracts?
Well, there was this whole, slavery thing that happened. And then, we're really only looking at, since 1960, a lot of possibilities even open to African-American people and other minorities. So we're only looking at 40, 50 years, and we're still not even on the same level playing field. Obviously I'm preaching to the choir, but I want to make sure folks understand the need for these types of programs. It's not that blacks or other minorities can't do the work. I work with everybody, with them all the time. They absolutely can. It's just that when you have not been, when you were coming up, if you didn't have someone that maybe told you the importance of going to school, or the importance of hey, here's how your finances work, so you can keep your credit in a certain condition, or maybe, hey, here's how you go and learn this trade so you can be self-employed, or here's how you can open your own business. If a lot of my my Caucasian friends, their parents have been entrepreneurs for a number of generations, or they were, they benefited from other programs from the government hundreds of years ago, land grants and things like that. So, and I'm definitely not one to make excuses, but I always try and be realistic. I mean, there's a lot that our community, African American community, has to do to really catch up. And we've got to take our responsibility, but also these programs really help us to at least run a little bit faster. So yes, for sure, we're the majority of people in Baltimore City, but we're not the majority as far as entrepreneurs, as far as business owners. We're not the majority as far as income generating. We're not as far as contributing to the tax base. So, and also, as far as certain areas, it's much harder to get loans. If your credit is not, if you've had sporadic work, and then you try and you've sporadically paid your bills, and you try and open up a business, and then you try and get a loan, they're gonna be like, no, you're not paying your thing. So there's a lot of common things, like just access to capital. It's very difficult for many folks to get access to capital. Some just because it may be just because they're black and they walk in the room and it's like, oh, well, we're not giving it to that guy. That still exists. I see it all the time, sadly. But also maybe their credit just isn't in a certain situation. Maybe their education, they're not educated as far as how to create value propositions, how to develop proper proposals, how to build a team. These things have to be taught the same way they were taught to other communities. We need to, that's why I do what I do. I work hard for free in many cases to teach these. Sean's out all the time teaching these things so that minorities can use these tools and then compete. So they are absolutely necessary, and hopefully one day they won't be. I don't know when that's going to be, maybe not in my lifetime, but right now they're absolutely necessary so that folks can have an opportunity to improve their personal situations, add more jobs, and improves the community, increases the tax base, and hopefully that means better schools, better firefighters, better police officers, and a more stable local economy. But these kinds of things help that to happen.
Speaking of that, you talked about subs and primes, which I don't think a lot of people will understand the difference in what you're talking about. What is the difference between a sub and a prime, and how that kind of fits in with the MBE certification?
Right. So a prime contract is pretty much is the boss. They're the lead as far as within that project or that contract. That's the one that's actually contracted with the state directly. So they invoice the state. We pay them as far as by invoices that they do throughout the duration of the contract. So if there are subcontract opportunities, and mind you, I don't necessarily want to stick on construction. We have a lot of other range of opportunities as far as outside of construction. You have where we have the category of facility maintenance, which is janitorial, which is security. We have, like I said, commodity contracts, which, the other day we procured a commodity contract of egg bagels, and it was over $10 million. You know what I mean? I put a 15%, MBE goal on that because there was some wholesalers and some manufacturers as far as that does that type of work. And this is not just within Maryland. This is with a lot of other participating states that are registered in Maryland. So the prime is set up. Prime is contracted with the state. Now they have that contract, and they'll find subcontract opportunities within that contract. Like we talked about before, commodity contracts are very, very limited as far as where they're potentially will have subcontract opportunities. We have to look at as we're looking at the value, looking at exactly what's being asked of this contract to see if we can pull something from it. If then we look at facility maintenance, janitorial, or security, or like I said, construction. Especially with construction, that's where you have a lot more opportunities that actually you can pull some MBE subcontract opportunities from that, because that requires a construction contract will requires so many components to it to get the job done. It's not, necessarily coming from a general contractor can't do everything within that house. One of the requirements that we do have, saying if you are a prime contractor with the state, you're only required to at least perform 25% of the work, no matter what. That doesn't matter if you're MBE or whatever. You're your prime contract on the contract, you have to at least do 25% of the work. The remainder 75%, you can sub out, as long as you abide. If there's a subcontracting goal or participation on it, you have to make sure that you adhere to those goals and be able to show just cause as far as how you're achieving it. Other than that, as far as that within that prime contract, you at least need to do 25% of the work.
So if I get a contract for $1 million, so that's the next question. If I'm minority, you help me get my certified as minority owned business. How do I then begin to go find contracts that I could be able to bid on to be able to start to get in the game?
That's a really good question. So, one, I highly recommend that any business, they look at who is going to buy their products and services. Just that's first. So if you can sell to the government, federal, state, local, and it's not just, because remember, every single county, every city, every municipality in the state, they have their own procurement office and they buy things. So so there's a lot of opportunity. But then also, can you sell to other businesses and can you sell to the public? And so I always start there. Who can you sell to? And then creating really a growth strategy that looks at, okay, we're going to go out. This is what we sell. Let's research these agencies, and see what the administration is trying to do. Like, for example, if Governor Hogan says, okay, in my budget, I want to put a lot of money into infrastructure. Hey, that's great for folks who work on bridges and work on roads. But maybe if he says, and I don't think this is the case, but let's say, well, I'm making cuts maybe in these certain services. Well, if you provide those certain services, maybe training or something for kids or something like that, I'm not saying that's what he's done, but just as an example, then that may not be it may not be good for your business, but you have to find other agencies that will be buying what you have to offer. So first and foremost, figure out who's buying what you have to offer. Second, after that, then you have to really start to build relationships, and because the contracting game is not a quick game. It's not like you just write a proposal and you get a check. You're talking usually a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on when you come in on the actual cycle, their budget cycle, when they're spending money. But you really need to look at that as like a year or two game. But then, like I said, who else is buying your stuff? You should be selling, because you've got to keep the lights on. You've got to be selling to those other folks too. So it's a combination of business development with different agencies, federal, state, local level, if you're able to do that, business to business to, directly to the consumer if you can. And that's difficult. Then along with that, you're trying to understand, okay, who are my competitors? So I might go after, look, I can do all of that as a prime. Great. I have the capacity. I've got the staff, the knowledge, the know-how, everything. I've got the money. I can go after it. But let me tell you, I've done a lot of subcontracting work over the last 10 years. Those checks cash the same. And let me tell you, to have a long contract, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, with the DOD or with the state of Maryland, and you're getting steady, consistent checks as a self-employed person, that is a great thing. That helps you to hire people, gives other people jobs, helps you to really build your business. So, I always tell my clients, say, look, whatever you're going after, don't let your ego stop you from getting paid. If you can do the prime work, great. If you can't, be a sub. The prime is responsible for the proposal writing, the payroll, all the requirements, all that extra stuff that requires a whole lot of infrastructure and a whole lot of money. If you're a sub, you come, show up, do your work, you go home. So there's a lot of benefits with starting off as a sub. the MBE, I think, is a great catalyst to help folks even consider, okay, I'm going to hire this smaller company. I'm going to consider this smaller company. And it allows you to get paid so you can hire people and have a positive effect in your community. So I think, so just to recap, one, identify who you're going to sell your stuff to, who's buying it. Then understand if whether or not you can even support a prime contract. If not, no problem. Go after sub work. Also, and then probably the third thing is understand that your competitors today may be your partners tomorrow, because quite often what we see at federal, state, and local level, they'll put out contracts, and then it's like, okay, we're looking for small minority businesses, but we can't find them, or we found one. But guess what? If two people both apply and you guys partner up, and whoever wins, you're both going to help each other out, and you have the capacity. That's smart. That's legal. There's nothing wrong with that. But often businesses don't think about working with other businesses. They see them as competition. When quite often, if you guys get together, you can win more contracts and make a whole lot more money.
Exactly. So
that's usually those are the places where we really start. And then from there, just help people to be realistic about their money, their resources, their time, what they're really good at, and what they can commit to. Because what you don't want to happen is you get a contract and then you don't fulfill, and then you're basically blacklisted. As far as that's what we always say. But is that correct, Sean?
Yeah, that's correct, and that's what we try to encourage, to obtain that experience by getting into joint ventures. Some partnerships. That's why we recommend. As far as attending pre-bid conferences, so you can kind of do your networking there. But kind of step back a little bit. To answer one part of your question is the way you find out about state opportunities, you enroll in the eMaryland Marketplace. Absolutely. eMaryland Marketplace is the state procurement site. So it's like eBay. Okay, you have a lot of product here, and you're trying to select something and bid on something, and hopefully you become the winner. So in this case, that eMaryland Marketplace, and what we do, we find whomever's, once the bid closes, we find out who is the lowest bidder, and then we'll look at them and then go through an evaluation process, and then go from there. Mm-hmm. So once you enroll in eMaryland, that's where you'll get, based on your company's profile, which you start selecting as far as the different skill set that your company provides by the commodity codes that's selected. That's how you get your notifications. So saying if you're an expert in janitorial, you'll get all those janitorial email solicitation that comes out and say there's a janitorial contract that you can bid on. From that point, you'll click on that solicitation. You'll find out. You automatically go to, that link and read up on what's it about. You print out the specifications as far as what this janitorial contract entails. Then in the middle of that page, you'll provide it as far as when there's a pre-bid conference. A pre-bid conference happens when there's an opportunity that you can attend, that you'll meet with the procurement officer. If there's an MBE goal, you meet with the MBE liaison, you meet with the project manager, you meet with everybody who has something to do with this particular contract. That's where you have an opportunity to kind of learn from A to Z on what this contract entails, what has to be done. From that point, now you're not the only one in here. You're pretty much in this room with a lot of other people that's trying to bid on it. You can ask as much questions you can that you need to. You can do measurements. You can do whatever. You can even ask on if this is a 3-year janitorial contract. You can ask them what was the previous contract amount. If there's no change, that'll even give you some more guideline as far as on how should I bid this contract. But also at the same time, some people fall in a position of they want to win the contract so bad, so they are underbid so low that they can be awarded to it. So what happens is we have a lot of companies that does this, that they want to get some business with the state. They want to start working. So once they start working on that contract and they bid it on that contract so low that now, because of the living wage increases, because of cost of supplies and so forth, they're not able to actually perform as well as they should. And the next thing you know, they're defaulting. Okay. So you definitely want to keep mindful of that and not just always overextend yourself thinking just to win a contract. So pretty much that's how you're notified. And then, like I said, you're at that meeting, you're able to ask various questions, and then there's a time period for you to send in your bid submission electronically on how you feel what would cost for your company to do that particular job, and then you pretty much wait and see if hopefully you're awarded that contract, and then you're notified that you're the apparent awardee, which means you're the lowest bidder, or you're the second lowest bidder. Sometimes that first lowest bidder may be automatically rejected because of whatever reason that they forgot to add an MBE participation. If they got something within their documents that we have to reject them, and then we go to the next lowest bidder.
So if you default on a contract, are you then permanently stricken from being able to get any more contracts?
No, you're definitely not permanently stricken. I mean, we actually we don't necessarily have a hit list, so to speak. However, we do for if your information comes up again that you're a parent awardee, we put that in a potential part of that that evaluation, whether or not if you're going to win that award, but that doesn't hold you back. I mean, if it's so extreme that it's been detrimental to a lot of other companies, not just your company, then yeah, we may have to wait on it. We'll give you reasoning why we have to, but we always give a full description on why you're being rejected if you're being rejected for an award.
Well, here's my question. I don't know if y'all can answer this, but before I get to that, Keith Scott said, can a nonprofit be considered a minority business?
I'm not sure.
Unfortunately, a few years ago, we actually can't count the nonprofit MBE firm. They can be an MBE firm, but we can no longer count them. So that kind of puts put a little strain into especially a lot of janitorial companies where the blind industry, BISM, they have to buy. We actually have a state mandate that you have to buy supplies from BISM. So before you can able to count those purchases through BISM as your MBE participation, but that stopped maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. That you no longer can calculate nonprofit MBE firms towards your MBE goal participation.
And the blind industries, I heard they take down. Everything Maryland does has to go through them. And I remember Senator Barbara Robinson put in legislation to stop that, to try to get, small minority contractors to be able to get some of these contracts. But they tore her butt up down there for that.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, Barbara Robinson was trying to pass legislation last year. I think it was Senate Bill 1136, I believe, was wanted to allow a non-minority firm purchase a minority firm and allow that non-minority firm to keep the MBE certification for additional 3 years, which was been absurd, which would have been ridiculous, because that's where you might as well just open it up to everybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's something you really don't want.
I didn't know that. Well, speaking of opening it up to everybody, our mayor recently opened up MBE to everybody and allowed for the LGBT community to be included in MBE women WBE certification. Does that extend to Maryland, or is that just for Baltimore?
That's just for Baltimore City.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's
Maryland doesn't.
Not yet. I know that there's some conversations about it, and see it if I'm not too sure if anybody has drafted a bill this General Assembly, but I know that was just an emergency legislation piece that the mayor has done just for Baltimore City.
Yeah, executive order that was a good conversation on the show, nonetheless.
Just keeping with that conversation for a minute, do you see the state having issues with that to where there's a need for a special classification or designation for the LGBT community, or do you feel that they already qualify for minority status in many different levels, whether they be a white gay woman or whether they be a black gay man or black gay woman? Do you see that there's really a necessary need to have these quotas?
Right. So yeah, we're looking upon that. I mean, what the makeup as far as NBE, minority business, who can get certified? Women, African American, whether it be male or female, Latino, Hispanic Americans, South Asian Americans, Pacific Island Americans, those are the categories that can be certified. So really, when you look at the LGBTQ community, pretty much everybody within that category will already get their certification, with the exception of white men. So you would kind of think that, is there white men, are they deficient in acquiring these type of contracts or state contracts as a whole, which you come and say, no, they don't. I mean, they qualify because, and trust me, if there's a discrimination case, hey, I told folks, I'll be up there right with you. Correct. But understand that there's no checklist, there's no box to say, hey, is this person, what sexuality is this person fall under? There's nothing like that. We don't even, we see who they are just based on as far as their name and information, or they've done business with the state previously. However, that's not in front of the evaluation process. Like I said, if they're bid low, that they are the apparent wardee. When it comes to me, if they have an MBE component to it, what I'm doing is verifying to make sure that those MBEs are certified it has the proper NACE code of the work that you're contracting them for. Some people has gotten rejected saying that this company does concrete manufacturing, and they actually don't. Not saying that they don't do it, but they're not certified in that area, and that's what kicks you out. So we're looking at that components. We're not looking at, what's your sexuality and so forth, because, to me, there shouldn't be an issue. If you do great work, you do great work. It shouldn't classify whether or not you're really anything, but it's just because based on what the MBE program was initially established as by Parent J. Mitchell, was because black companies weren't getting their fair share.
Right. Speaking of the quotas, and you mentioned the categories of different groups that qualify for an MBE. Right. Now, I'm a mixed race person. I don't hold that back. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily side, though, on Hispanic issues all the time. Matter of fact, in this particular issue, I'm actually kind of questioning, is there even a need for quotas anymore as far as Hispanics are concerned? I mean, especially when you see most of the contracts that are being operated in the city, a lot of cases being handed down by bigger contractors are going to a lot of these Hispanic firms. I mean, is it necessary to include them necessarily in the quota anymore?
Well, it's just, because everybody falls under, the MBE umbrella, where you can kind of, what we spoke about before regarding the disparity study, saying if we're looking at construction, that's where you can be more direct as far as in your saying that you have to work with this certain subgroup of vendors. So if we're looking at construction, we can apply 7% African American and 4% Asian American, where we know that that's where we need to increase our participation in those areas within the construction field. Or like IT, where you have African American, you have women, as well as, don't quote me, I think it's Hispanic, so you have three categories.
Or Indian, or
right. They will fall under the South Asian, the Asian aspect. But yeah, so you have those areas that can be applied more depending on the percentage of the MBE goal. As long as that MBE goal achieves is over the required amount that you can apply that sub goal, then you can apply that sub goal, and then you can be more direct in saying to that prime contract, you have to sub out to African American, you have to sub out this percentage amount to Asian American, and so forth.
How often is the feasibility study done? Because in some cases you see Hispanics dominating things like groundskeeping or landscaping for the government. You see them dominating again in construction. How often are these feasibility studies done to try to correct some of these, disparities?
I want to say that, and I know the feasibility study was just recently done, and it's like it's a 200-300 page document. So don't I haven't read through all of it.
And there was a gap between the Malley administration and Governor Hogan.
Right.
So Governor Hogan stepped up and actually
and got it done.
Like him with the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So how many pages it was.
Right. So it was done. I think that what you probably see is because you see an abundance of Hispanic vendors. Correct. It's just because of, it's probably gotten to a point of, that particular company that they may be subcontracting to gave them a better price on, whatever scope of work that they were looking for to get done. So that's where it kind of falls. And also we don't necessarily put parameters saying that you have to find an MBE from Baltimore or from a certain location. If they're certified in the state, you can get anybody as long as they're certified and as long as you achieve that. So so that's where dealing with construction contracts that I really want to push that level even more as far as to get those sub goals on it, especially African American, where we need to really generate, because there's a lot of MBE vendors that are in the construction field, and get them more work. That's something like, Hassan and I was sitting there talking about, because I've just recently, been getting, sort of a pushback with my gold placing with a contract in Western Maryland, particularly in Cumberland, Maryland. And we have a contract that's out there that we're building a new Maryland State Police Barracks and a garage in Cumberland, Maryland. That's being advertised between 10 and 15 million. I put a 30% MBE goal on it, along with a sub goal of 7% African American and a 10% veterans, which I find it very achievable. I don't put goals just to say it's just to put on there and make it difficult for vendors.
Right.
However, I understand as far as when vendors that are in that Western Maryland area, they said it's not every day that we get this type of contract. So we want to make sure we contract folks out that are in our area.
Correct.
I get it. A lot of them even said, look, we don't want to work with the program. I understand what they're saying, you know what I mean? And then some. But however, we're open for business. As Governor Hogan said, Maryland is open for business. So we're bringing in opportunities that my goal is to hope that an MBE prime contractor wins that award. So if you win that award, you have an opportunity to actually fulfill a lot of that MBE participation as well, because we have, through the O'Malley administration, that you were able to now self-perform up to 50% of that MBE goal. So in that case, you can self-perform 15, and then you have to sub out the remainder 15. And if you're an African-American firm, you can do that 15, as well as you can swallow that 7% sub goal of African-American. So that's where we try to push the lever. However, I understand, but if you do enough outreach, because a lot of folks that we don't, approve waivers, but if you show just cause that you actually outreach to these folks, because we know that, if you call a certain number of vendors and they're, have work, they're not busy. I mean, they're busy. We understand that. That's how you document your information and say, hey, I called 10 vendors in this particular category and this and that, and I need to ask for a waiver because I can't get anybody to work. We understand that. We'll do sort of a compliance check to see if making sure that you did reach out, and then go from there. But overall, we try to really, and I gave him even another example, like the 21st Century School that's being constructed right now, the Calvin Rodwell Elementary Middle School, that's on Liberty and Hillsdale.
Right here, right.
Right now, that's the prime contractors from Sweden. Where you have, but you look at it, you have at least 36 just in Baltimore City alone. You have about 36 general contractors that can do that work, minority contractors, and out of that 36, 27 of them are African American. However, I understand the process on. They might have bid on it, but they might not been in the lowest bidder.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So that's something that we evaluate and look at, because we're all about, as far as contracting and making opportunities for folks, but also we want to make sure that we save the Maryland people money. We don't want to, the taxpayers' money. We don't sit and want to just be thrifty and this, spend and just be would be very wasteful.
I understand the lowest bidder thing, but if you have some companies that have an advantage over other companies, like, again, for instance, I see these Hispanic companies all the time, and a lot of times they win these contracts because they're willing to, take the lowest bid. They're willing to contract it out as low as possible. And they're going to cut corners their own way internally, not necessarily towards the state. And again, they may not necessarily be scaling the jobs for their workers. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the whole evaluation process. Now, mind you, when we evaluate that contract, we don't see everybody's bid.
Right.
We take that lowest one and we evaluate that, and we see if they're coming with all the components. Now, by historically, and if you have a seasoned procurement office, they can tell that if they way underbid it and they're going to underperform.
Correct.
So that gives a red flag, and that's where they'll go through extra measures to make sure that they're going to evaluate this properly and actually award. But even if that doesn't work, then we go to the next one. But also we have to also keep in mind that hopefully we'll have a next one to go to. Because in order to a contract like that's valued at over $200,000, $100,000, I'm sorry, that you have to take it to the board, the BPW board. Okay. So of course the three individuals that compose the BPW is the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer. They frown upon if you're going to come towards them with one bid. Because that's something that we vaguely will want to do with sole source or just do just a single bid. We want to make sure that we've done enough work outreach to actually get participation, so we can have 2 and 3 good solicitations, so we can make a true assessment and true evaluations. There are in some situations that we have to go through a sole source or just only one,
because it's a specialty, or
right? It's a specialty,
like
or if there's an emergency procurement, that's when I pretty much won't see that type of contract, because we're pushing it. We need to hurry up and rush. And per COMAR, it necessarily doesn't require you put MBE participation.
That's like the statues, the
right? Exactly.
You
know what I mean? Well, it's just the Harriet. Now, I would say we worked on, which one of my projects was the Harriet Tubman Visitor Center down at Church Creek in Eastern Shore. We had a 30% MBE goal on it. The original awardee was an African-American firm. However, through different things, they ended up losing the award, and we ended up going to the second lowest bidder. But however, it was a 30%, and that was successfully. But as you talk about the statues, that statues was supposed to have been done a long time ago, but now it finally, because I think back in 2012 or 13, it didn't pass as far as before the Hogan administration, but now it did pass, in which I think it was pretty much like a year behind. They really wanted to get it done, so that's why it was put into an emergency procurement. And that's why I mentioned that sometimes when there's not an MBE participation on it, doesn't say that MBE can't bid on that contract. There's still opportunities for them to bid on it. Now, I understand on why that it had to get approved for sole source, because I believe that the governor wanted to get the same vendor who had did a couple other statues that were in the State House, that they wanted to get that same vendor because of just past experience, and that's why it was pushed.
Wow.
So we got another question. This one is actually a really good one. How do you suggest that MBE firms transition when the graduate from a program of a company no longer qualifies when they exceed the size cap? And so sometimes primes that you had teamed with before as a sub no longer want to team with you because you don't help them meet the MBE goals.
Well, that happens every day, and that's just business. I mean, a business relationship should be beneficial for both sides. If you guys got together because of your MBE status or your 8A status on the federal level or whatever, now you don't have it, that's just business. But what I would say for folks who are starting out, and then I'll talk about people who are in that situation right now, if you're starting out, kind of like what I alluded to earlier, the contracting game is a long-term game, and you've got to have a long-term plan, and you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. You go to any store, they've got 5 or 6, 10,000, however many products that they sell, because different people want different things. Any contractor, you've got to find ways to sell your products and services to different people, federal, state, local, outside of the state, and you have to build capacity to do that. Also, if you can, of course, to other businesses and to government. Also, and for folks who are in that situation now, I would strongly recommend reevaluating your growth plan for the next 3 to 5 years, looking at your market, seeing who really wants to buy your stuff. If it's not here in the state anymore, then go into other states. Also, overseas, we do work in Kenya, we do work in India. They buy stuff too. So it's not game over. I think you just have to reevaluate who you're trying to sell to, and your plan for building capacity. And if you're in that situation right now, and of course, we help people with that all the time. Please feel to reach out to me. But if you are starting off, learn from that. Don't be in that situation 7 to 10 years from now. And also, what's the thing I see at the federal level with the 8A program, people will graduate, and because they had 8A status, they had preferential. People were okay. 8A, we're going to go ahead and look at them maybe first. Same thing with MBE. It's just that it's a tool, but don't let it be a crutch. You still need to compete. You still have to have high quality products and services. You still need to have a strong business development program. You still need to be reaching out and constantly building relationships, because if not, you're going to end up not getting enough customers, and you're going to shut down. So it's a common problem, but that really comes from proper planning, constantly looking for new work in different areas, and always continuing to try and improve what you do and grow your company so you can stay competitive.
Right. And that's what, if you're graduating out of these programs, clearly you should be that prime person. You should be that prime contractor. And that's why it's very unique with the SBR program, even though it's saying if you graduated from a certain NACE code, because some people, they may graduate from a NACE code, but they're still certified in other areas as far as within their company. But when we're looking at the SBR program, you qualify, saying if you're a construction, if you have a construction company, you qualify with the SBR program as long as you have at least 50 and less 50 and under employees, or you don't make 7 million consecutively for 3 years. So if you have 49 employees and you make over 7 million, you'll qualify for the SBR program. Okay. So if you're a service company like a janitorial or security or so forth, if you have 100 employees and don't make less than 10 million consecutive for 3 years, you can qualify for the Small Business Reserve Program. So it's very flexible, and like I said, it puts you in a position that you need to not just rely, as Will said, just don't rely on the MBE certification or the MBE program, because that's a resource. Now you want to make sure that you get a piece of the pie no matter what. However, there's other programs, as the SBR program is designed as far as to put you in that prime status so you can get the experience, the knowledge, as far as the expertise under your company's umbrella, or put it in your portfolio that you have served as a prime contractor, so you can get geared up to take on those bigger contracts.
So there is a cap to be considered a minority contractor, right? I think it's at 4 million.
Right. There's a cap. I mean, but it's not like it's every day of you have to have it consecutively. It's not like every day that you possibly could reach that cap. So don't think that it's, because I even, I look at it this. So sometimes when we look at contracts, like any contract, especially when it comes to construction, any contract that's valued at $100,000 and under automatically is procured as an SBR procurement, Small Business Reserve. Anything over, that's what I see, and I evaluate that. But even if I see you have a small scope of work within that contract, and it's saying it's for 3 or 4 million, I'm going to take, the advantage to even procure that as an SBR as well, because I'd say that prime contractor, where sort of the average of the small business can really manage other companies coming in and be able to do that contract, be able to do that project successfully.
So, because my question was, and a legislator when I talked about this, he agreed. The question was, when we heard this hoopla about minority contracting within the medical marijuana field, right? And we had legislators saying that they were pushing for black inclusion and minority. But the question was, how do you stay minority inclusion when you had to have 10 million coming in the door to even be qualified to be one of these marijuana growers or distributors, which would have disqualified you from being an MBE in the first place. Right. So you really weren't going after minority contractors. And that was just some fluff spin that you were putting on to the black people, but in fact, it couldn't have happened. It was kind of contradictory to. I just want to make sure that was correct.
Right. I mean, and this is why I say, not only just pinpointing on that, I try to, encourage, those MBE firms, whether being certified or not certified, to really, get in tap, to really know your legislators, because stuff like that you need to be abreast, you need to be aware of. I try to encourage folks to, click on, every other Wednesday and listen on the Board of Public Works. See exactly how these contracts and everything is approved, and actually see, how agencies are really scrutinized. So, sometimes, and I've heard some people say, "Oh, I miss Arnold Jolivet." I'm like, "Yeah, I miss him too." However, there was a lot of good old boy network being done through the O'Malley administration, because I know that it even affected me on the job that I was doing when I was, this is my second administration, and I went through much more scrutiny or pushback dealing with the O'Malley administration. Then I have a lot of support and a lot of encouragement as far as really pushing those MBE goals and getting those vendors as far as the work and reaching out. It was wonderful to see, like I said, being in Western Maryland and seeing so many black folks, seeing so many women coming through that door for that pre-big conference, when I know that I was going to get pushback. And it was, I was like literally standing up and saying, hey, I was glad, because that's where they would say that, they have a lot of folks that are out there to say, well, minority business, they don't want to come work out here. And then when I say, well, look, you had about 30 people in this room that want to do work. You need to start with this list. Don't go to the director. You start with the list that's in attendance right now and reach out to them and get work and get some contracts with them, because they are showing you there that they want to do work and they open for as far as the business opportunities that the state has.
Wow. That's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I hope y'all got it all. If not, you're going to have to go back and rewind the program and listen to it again and again. I know I learned a lot today. But
this is really informative. And can I ask just a last question? So the MBEs are regulated under COMAR, correct? Is there anything, and I'd like to pose the question to both of you gentlemen, is there anything within the current structure of MBE that you would like to see changed in the future?
Well, one of the things that I would say that I would like, as far as I guess better legislation that supports the MBEs when it comes to, like I said, we have our contract set up with the prime. So if the prime does something wrong, we can immediately stop a project, stop a contract. Where versus if something's going wrong as far as with the MBE, but necessarily not under their doing, it could be some type of situation with the prime and the MBE is going through, and more on the prime. We should really have that same process as far as to be able to let's mediate, let's do this and do that, instead of some prime contractors will not notify us right away and automatically kick that MBE off, which we do have certain statutes as far as liquidated damages and so forth that we can apply towards that vendor and say, look, you done this process wrong. You still got to pay that MBE. Or if not, then we're going to be applying $250, $350 or whatever daily until you straighten out what you need to straighten out with that vendor. Or we're going to be holding your last couple of the checks, which you got to pay all these other folks, but we're not going to pay you until you satisfy your obligation with those vendors, with that MBE. So it's situations like that. And and there's other maybe policies or bills that's out there that maybe need amended to kind of strengthen up the more of participation, more of, I really think that we really need to raise the veteran goal. There's a lot of veteran owned companies. There's a lot of black owned veteran companies that are certified, which you can satisfy both. And a lot of people don't know that just much, that you can be an MBE MBE firm and also have a your veteran certification through the Veteran Affairs, and you can satisfy both goals if there is, because that's one of our biggest challenges, is really finding enough certified veteran companies that we can apply those put a veteran participation on contracts. Yeah.
What about you, Mr. Holmes?
I'll tell you what I would like to see is really something to address probably one of the biggest issues. It's access to capital. And I think that if there was a way we could evaluate a company, and if we can say, look, you're proficient in this skill, then somehow leverage that or use that in a way to say, look, then that means based on this industry, based on the kind of work you're going to do, based on your ability to earn, you can have access to a certain amount of money so that you can buy what you need, so you can actually compete, so you can hire who you need, so you can be prepared, you can build capacity. That's really the greatest challenge. I can work with a company, help them to sell, get the revenue up, but if they have bad credit, or if they, for whatever reason, aren't able to raise enough capital, they are stuck. And so I would love to see either legislation or programs working with banks or other kind of funding sources that make capital easier for minority businesses to attain, so they can actually really implement that money, hire people, have an effect on their community, and really grow these companies.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And I would want to say real quick before you close out that, we are working with, as far as DGS, we are working with, other organizations to really increase our, MBE portfolio with the Black Chamber of Commerce, with the Baltimore Urban League, even Sharif Small. He's very good as far as really tapping into that veteran piece. I mean, when he does his outreach, it just amazes me how many people comes out on like the weirdest day of the week. And it's, and he has a lot of people, and they do follow up. And that's the thing about it. Just don't attend, follow up with the resources, which they definitely do. They flood my phones, my emails, and so forth. So there's other, of course, when you're saying Sheila, the Maryland Minority Contract Association, and also with Wayne Frazier and the Maryland Washington Contract Maryland Washington minority companies that we participate in. We kind of, when we have a big project, we reach out to those organizations to say, hey, can you forward this information, this solicitation out to your folks, which would really help. Like I said, with that Cumberland projects, we have folks coming from Waldorf, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Prince George's County, they're coming in from different, all throughout the state, even from Pennsylvania, the ones that were certified in Pennsylvania, and they have that MBE certification with Maryland. So that's the partnership when Will talked about before, that we try to bridge those gaps, which really wasn't there before. And we're now really trying to utilize, those particular resources in-house, as well as encouraging other folks to use those resources as well.
And speaking of resources, if you're in Baltimore or really anywhere in the DMV, there are a number of free resources for you. Mm-hmm. In Baltimore, Paul Taylor, through the mayor's office, has tremendous resources with the Small Business Resource Center. There's SCORE, there's the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Development Center, and there are centers throughout the state, in Virginia and DC, Maryland. So first of all, look for what you can get for free. Obviously, there's information on the internet, but there are people who are paid by your local government to help you prepare to go after these contracts. I would definitely recommend starting there. And then if you need additional assistance, definitely. I mean, Sean is amazing. Please reach out to him. And of course, obviously I'm here to help as well. But this may sound like a lot of information, and it is quite daunting, but you can do it. All you got to do, and I would recommend getting a team together and make it happen.
Yep. And real quick, one more thing. I always tell people, get in contact with me especially if you're a startup firm, if you're looking for office equipment and so forth. We have a couple of programs that we have, Gov Deals, that's saying if we're getting, say, if we have a surplus of items that we're getting, you can get on those at cost. We have the Federal Surplus Program, which we support, a nonprofit organization, which, George Mitchell is probably one of our top beneficiaries, that our secretary Ellington Churchill is great friends with him, with that he's has capitalized on getting the computers and a lot of food and all of that stuff is where we obtain that through the federal program. So there's opportunities like that. But like I said, I always say to startup business, don't burn your money and don't get yourself in debt on buying equipment, office equipment, and so forth. Even vehicles and so forth. You can go to Gov Deals, which that's a Maryland entity that you can purchase a lot of products as far as through them at very, very low cost, almost next to nothing.
Got to thank you guys for what you do, because again, Arnold Jonavet used to be a real big supporter and fan of the DMV Daily Radio program. Well, actually, our newspaper when we started the online paper.
Sure.
And again, I'm glad to see that there's still folks out there that are supporting, fighting, trying to educate, and trying to keep the community moving forward as far as MBEs is concerned. So thank you both, gentlemen.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Make
sir.
sure you look up WHCUSA.com is the website.
Love it.
And Delegate Shonston.
No, don't mix it. I got my state hat on, so don't get me in trouble.
Or should we say mayor? You think about running for mayor?
No, that's too much.
No.
Too much. But we never know what may happen. But I'm all about as far as supporting my boy.
We
Chris
love
Harris.
announcements here at DMV Daily. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I'll wait for
I
Sheila.
will not be running for any political office. There's an announcement.
You're just going to disclose that now. Eh?
That's right.
Okay.
All right, family, remember, your promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.
Free
Free
Keith
Keith
Davis.
Davis.